It's the Security Weekly News, and it's the auspicious 399. I'm Doug White, and it is Friday, the 19th of July, 2024. We are sort of superseding our regular content to talk about the CrowdStrike slash Microsoft slash are you sitting in an airport right now twiddling your thumbs, or maybe at the DMV, or maybe at a toll booth somewhere, or who knows where, stuck. And so all the other stories we're just going to kind of supersede with this, and Josh and I are going to talk about it. So stick around. Should be interesting.
This is a Security Weekly production for security professionals by security professionals. Please visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe to all the shows on our network.
We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
It's the show that keeps you up to date on the latest security news twice a week. Your trusted source for accurate security information and expert analysis. It's time for the Security Weekly News.
Created in 2005 and hosted by security industry veterans, Paul Security Weekly is your source for in-depth coverage of the latest vulnerabilities, exploits, and security research. Our weekly security news discussion dives deep into the security issues we face today and potential solutions in a fun and lively atmosphere. Each week, we bring on guests from the security community to learn about their journey and discuss topics relevant to their work and research. You can also subscribe to our show by visiting securityweekly.com/subscribe or look for Paul Security Weekly in your favorite podcast catcher. We've recorded a ton of content over the years, so we created Spotify playlists featuring some of our favorite episodes, including interviews with Marcus Random, John McAfee, and Chris Roberts, to name a few. You can find them at securityweekly.com/starter packs.
All right, from the island of Elba, it's the Security Weekly News. I'm Doug White. Every time you hit that like and subscribe button, Josh gets a small electric shock, so go crazy and tell your friends. We got a special show for you today in terms of talking about this big event of the day. The big news headline this morning was that American Airlines, United Airlines, Delta Airlines, that was the first one I saw. And of course, this has been expanding all day. But they said that all the airlines had grounded their flights this morning due to a, quote, technical issue. So this was a very early morning story that I saw. Now, I mean, as you probably experienced in the past, this causes a whole lot of fun in airports around the world. And when hundreds of thousands of people are trapped on the ground in El Paso, Texas, waiting for their flight to New Jersey, and there are no seats, and you end up having to buy a 1968 Chevrolet Biscayne from a guy named Bert for $300 to drive home. Yeah, you've probably been there too. I mean, we've all done that at some point, probably more than once. But other services then started getting notified that 911 call centers, the IT services for the Olympics in Paris, the DMV all over the place. But I know the DMV in Rhode Island postponed all appointments until noon, and the DMVs in Mass were shut down. But basically, the issue hit Microsoft Windows systems that were running CrowdStrike, and CrowdStrike did issue a statement this morning that said that the issue has been identified, isolated, and a fix deployed. That doesn't mean everything's working yet. American Airlines made a statement then later about 8:30 this morning, that's Eastern Standard Time in the United States, said that they had been able to safely reestablish operations. And I was looking at Logan Airport and John F. Kennedy Airport, and there were cancellation delays all over the boards. But those had started, the afternoon flights seemed to be back on track. Statements about this issue included very vehemently from CrowdStrike that this was not a cyber attack. So before everybody got all worked up, because I think the very early morning stuff, there was some discussion that it could be some kind of an infrastructure attack or something like that. Microsoft posted at 6:46 a.m. Eastern Standard Time today that the underlying cause has been fixed, but that there is a residual impact that is still affecting some Microsoft 365 apps and services. So if you're headed to the airport, the DMV, or whatever, you might want to consider checking carefully, because you may end up sitting in a bar in the United Lounge in Tokyo for 20 hours. I've been there, done that, although that was a typhoon. But CrowdStrike said that the problem is a channel file, which contains data for the sensor. And so, and we'll talk some more about what CrowdStrike is in a minute. But symptoms may include hosts experiencing a bug check / blue screen of death, called a BSOD, which is related to the Falcon sensor of CrowdStrike. Now, they do have a workaround. This first article that I posted, so if you're looking for that, there is a link to it. But the workaround said that you basically boot up in safe mode or recovery environment, depending on what kind of system you're using. Go to the, et cetera, system 32 /drivers /CrowdStrike directory and locate a file matching C-000000291 star.sys, delete that file, and then boot normally. But I say that. I leave it to you to test the effect of that. That's what the article said. I have not tested that on a server. So before you start deleting any sys files, you might want to see what the impact is. Make sure you understand what you're doing before you jump in there and start deleting things. But so if you're stuck in an airport today, at least you can watch 398 back issues of Security Weekly News. And with that, I'm gonna introduce Josh Marpet, who is as ever our very knowledgeable, sexy, and amazing co-host, to talk about his story that he had already put up about this, and then we're going to talk about it some more. So, Josh, what's happening?
Okay, so as you know, CrowdStrike got borked last night across the entire world. The effects of this are outstandingly unpleasant. You mentioned DMVs and some airlines. Every single flight in the U.S. was grounded. Okay, in other words, all airlines, every airport, everywhere. It's done. I actually have an airport about a mile from my house. We typically have planes going over every 5 or 10 minutes. It's a little general aviation airport, but these lovely little planes, it's actually really nice. I like having that. There's nothing. There's absolutely nothing. Okay. They're handwriting boarding passes in India. So they actually have flights there, but they're handwriting your boarding pass. That's unpleasant.
Yep.
As far as I know, I've gotten reports that every Circle K is down. They're not able to sell gas or your coffee, which is like absolutely the worst. Good coffee, horrible that you can't get it. There are hospitals in the Netherlands that are down. This is going to kill people if it hasn't already. Let's be clear on that. Okay. Major financial institutions, at least one that I know of, is down. Several are up that I've heard about. It's fascinating, the implications of this, as well as your security maturity, how it affects you. If you test your updates before they go into CrowdStrike, if you trust CrowdStrike, you're destroyed right now. If you didn't trust it, or not that you didn't trust it, but if you test your updates, this doesn't hurt you because you tested it, found out it BSOD'd your machines, and you're no big deal. By the way, there's a lot of implications here. Let me explain something. Whether it's a VM or a physical machine, if it's running CrowdStrike, it's down right now. Okay. If it's down right now, that the problem is that it can't be brought up other than locally. You have to go hands-on to these machines. How many of you have machines in data centers 1,000 miles away, 2,000 miles away across the country for that offsite backup we've been telling you about for the last 20 years? Well, you're screwed. Somebody's going to have to get on a plane. Oh, wait, you can't. And you're in trouble. So get out that old Gran Torino out of the garage from Grandpa and drive those 3,000 miles, make it a good road trip because some company's paying for it, and get out to that data center where you've got those machines co-located. The actual Microsoft advice right now, the workaround, is to reboot the machine up to 15 times in order to have it hang onto the networking stack long enough to download the update, the fix from CrowdStrike, so that it'll take and actually fix the problem. This is not fun. And if you have set up your machines very securely, no local admin, your users who may be home, again, 1,000 miles, 2,000 miles, 3,000 miles away, they can't get into their machine. Okay, but that's fine. I mean, they can just airship it. Oh, wait. They can't get it on an airplane for air shipment back, can they? There's no airmail today. Sorry, your packages are not getting to you. Now, let's be clear. That means that Amazon packages are going to be delayed. Healthcare is screwed up. Your gas, your airplane, your DMV. The supply chain security implications of this are monstrous. Have you done a third-party risk management properly on your vendors, on your third-party world and fourth-party and fifth-party world to determine what outages will do to you? And if you haven't, this is your calling card to go to your boss and go, hi, I need budget. Why? VRM, third-party risk management. It is time to do some real third-party risk management and do it right. Because if you haven't yet, sorry, today's either going to be a really slow day or a really bad day. So, Doug, that's the long and the short of it. I mean, there's so much more going on right now. It's not even funny. Oh, by the way, there was also an Azure outage as well.
Yeah, well, there is an Azure outage that was causing similar problems and lockups and so forth. I do think some of it is starting to resolve because I was just looking at Flight View for JFK. They're showing traffic management program, which is what they put on their the FAA advisory when, for some reason, the control tower is holding inbound and outbound flights, and they're currently it's now at 2.2 hours and 51 minutes and not exceeding 5 hours and 4 minutes. So that's like the shortest delay they have at the moment and the longest delay. Now, of course, the supply chain issue not just extends, when you have a flight that's canceled or delayed at one airport, that causes, a chain reaction across everywhere, because that plane was supposed to fly to, I don't know, San Francisco, and now that plane can't get to San Francisco, so that crew doesn't get to San Francisco, so then the flight from San Francisco to Dallas can't leave, so that flight is delayed even more, and on and on. I mean, we've seen all these kind of things, many times. I've always, I'm both shocked that the airlines don't have better mechanisms for dealing with this, because we have like snowstorms, blizzards, thunderstorms, et cetera, all the time that cause these kind of massive problems. But I'm also amazed that the airlines function at all. I mean, if you actually know anybody who's been a flight attendant or a pilot, and you talk to them about the logistics involved in getting a 777 aircraft from John F. Kennedy International Airport to Frankfurt, Germany, getting all the people there, all the passengers there, getting all the passengers through customs, all the passengers through check-in and security and all that stuff, and then just getting a crew on the plane, fuel in the plane, bags on the plane. The plane actually takes off, flies across the Atlantic Ocean, lands in Frankfurt. It's kind of shocking that it works at all. And then you look at something like Flight View and see the thousands and thousands and thousands of aircraft that are in the air around any major city all the time. So I think this is going to take days to sort out, because when you have that many passengers sitting on the ground, and we've all been there. I mean, all of you have been there, and I've certainly been there, just sitting on the ground at JFK or Frankfurt or Hong Kong or wherever you happen to be sitting, and they're going, we now have 100,000 passengers who don't have seats, and we have to somehow try to slowly get those passengers in the not empty seats that we're leaving tomorrow and the next day and the next day. I think the worst thing I've ever heard of was I had a friend who was actually delayed in an airport for around 8 days before they could find them a seat to London, while they were just waiting, because there weren't any seats, because all the seats were sold and those people weren't willing to give up their seats, and on and on and on.
There's
Basically,
a certain amount of slop in the system, but not enough to absorb that many people
lot.
all at once. Yeah, absolutely agreed.
And post-pandemic, they really pared that down. I mean, when was the last time you were on a flight that wasn't completely sold out? I mean, I haven't been on one in a long time that had, I used to get on planes and you're like, wow, there's like, 19 people on this flight. Today, you don't see that very often. And when these things happen, there's just not a lot of empty seats to be had. But I think, I think what you said earlier that really underscores this is a lot of companies are very reliant on sort of automatic updates, and they don't. And I think this is becoming a bigger and a bigger problem, because like this is your problem that was going on. This broke 365 Defender. Okay, well, that's a big problem. And that also had a network data reporting service, and you may have policies that you can't connect if you can't test this stuff, and so on and so forth. And that was another one that was going on today, as well as this Azure SQL problem that was going on. And all those things bring down your operation. And I think what's happened, at least to me and what I've been observing, is that companies have become more and more dependent on a full-blown supply chain of plugins that are operating all these things. So you take an air traffic control tower, they may have a reliance on cloud-based server-side stuff and a bunch of plugin apps that are giving them the weather and all these other kind of logistics things. And I don't know that. So if you're sitting there going, no, Doug, that's completely wrong. I haven't been in a control tower in a long time. But I know that when something goes wrong, you can't have air traffic controllers sitting there with a big empty box on their screen where something was supposed to be that they rely on.
Dangerous as hell. I used to be in control towers quite a lot because I did video surveillance, and I did the video surveillance for several different airports on the tarmac. So these are the cameras they use to actually see where the planes are. Okay, you go this way. Like I was at one airport, they used to have the windows of the tower, fine, and 3 cameras for the entire bloody airport, major New York City airport. When I installed 30 cameras and got them up on the servers, and all, like I literally, as I'm getting them up, I'm doing it on a test bed system just to make sure they're working, right? I'm bringing up camera pictures. They're like running over and looking over my shoulder. The minute I brought them up, they're using them. Basically, they are so short on resources in most control towers, so short on the ability to monitor. That's why they're all chugging Pepto-Bismol all the time, because they're all freaking out. It's one of the shortest lived occupations and the highest stressed. I mean, besides the fact that if you make 2 of them go bang, it's really bad, but they don't have the information to do their job.
First time I ever went in a control tower, I was involved in a near miss between me and a Delta Airlines flight that when I landed my plane and the Delta flight had landed, the pilot came running at me and said, "What in the hell are you doing?" And I said, I just did what the control tower told me to do as the law requires. They told me to turn final right then, and they said it imperatively, and you don't question what they're telling you to do.
Yeah.
I mean, I had no reason to question it. It sounded like a reasonable request, but then, it turned out they had just told a Delta Airlines jet to turn on that same vector, who went underneath me, near miss reported. And we both went to the control tower, and they said, "Oh, here's the thing. We had a trainee. The scope was running about 4 minutes behind because the computer was slow." And, the person misunderstood and the controller misunderstood which call sign was which plane. And they thought I was the Delta jet, and the Delta jet was a small private aircraft. And fortunately, nobody was injured. And it was just probably nobody on the Delta jet even noticed anything happen. My passengers basically had to change their trousers.
Yeah, I was going to say, were you wearing the brown pants that day?
Yeah, pretty much everybody was, including the Delta pilots. They were not happy, and I wasn't either. It was very scary. But I mean, all that stuff, and as that stuff went from being these isolated mainframe access systems to being these cloud-based systems, guess what? All that stuff is now interrelated, and that's connected to the weather service, and the weather service is connected to the electrical, and on and on and on. And when one of those elements fails, it's no longer just, a control tower at the Omaha, Nebraska regional airport is not functioning. The airport's closed. Everybody's landing in Kansas City or something. It's now, that escalated and brought down, everything in the whole network. I mean, we've been seeing these for several years now. I mean, we saw, Southwest Airlines canceling thousands of flights a day because, this system was crashed and they couldn't get it back online. And of course, the ticketing system is tied into all that. And the tickets are tied to the security system and the Department of Homeland Security and the TSA, and everybody's tied into the same systems. And they're all using very homogenized networks, which are all using the same stuff that went out for bids. And so if everybody's got CrowdStrike and everybody's got Server 2022 and those systems start to fail,
monocultures
it just snowballs.
Monocultures are bad? Who would have thought? Crap. What was the astronaut that was laying on his back? And it's in a movie as well, but this is a true story. He's laying on his back, looking straight up at the sky where he's about to get his ass shot up into, right? And he goes, just think of it, 1.5 million parts, all done by the lowest bidder.
There you go.
And the other astronaut's like, "Oh shit, thank you so much, you asshole." Come on.
I mean, honestly, in a modern age, I don't even think it's a low. I mean, that quote holds up, but I don't even think it's a low bid problem with things like the FAA, because they never have enough budget and enough people. But at the same time, I mean, all this stuff was not low bid garbage. I mean, this was Microsoft Server and CrowdStrike, and it wasn't, some guy named Bernie wrote the code in Paramus, New Jersey. I mean, I used to see stuff like that all the time in corporate, where it's like, a guy named Bernie in Paramus, New Jersey wrote all our code, and he might not have known what he was doing.
I actually was there. That's not actually weirdly enough, I worked for a very short time at a private label credit card company in Palisades Park, New Jersey.
Okay.
So nearby, Bergen County, and where a guy named, it wasn't Bernie, but it was similar. It was one of those names, wrote their frigging Micro Focus COBOL code. Okay. So understood. Mm-hmm. No. In this case, we've got a major problem with monoculture and trusting, but not verifying. Okay.
Right.
And that's the big issue. In God we trust, all others we monitor. That's what the Navy says. Okay. And this is
Yep.
the problem. We're trusting that
Well,
these.
and I mean, and this whole Microsoft thing that Microsoft didn't invent it, but they sure promoted it, which is what I call the beta test culture. Of we just roll everything out and we rely on our users to report this, and that wasn't a huge issue when it was just end users at home, calling a help desk and saying, I don't understand, I've got a blue screen of death. Here's the error message. What does it mean? And they say, oh, just reboot, it'll be fine. Now that those systems have pervaded just about everything, and we link everything together with Active Directory, and now as we do that even more by linking it all together with the cloud, suddenly we've got cloud-based systems which are all sitting there, and those are all tied into everything else. And you saw this thing just spread like a plague. I mean, I was watching the stories too, and I just saw it just boom, boom, boom. At first it's a little minor issue, then all of a sudden, oh, JFK's down, and it's like, what? Wait, what? And then it's like, oh yeah, Boston Logan is down, and Hong Kong is down, and Sydney Airport is down, and every single airport in certain places is shut down, and it just spread. And then it was like the DMV, and now it's like the government, and like you said, they're doing handwritten tickets in places. I saw they were having to manually process passengers at they all the systems that they use, because most of you have flown recently probably, and when you're used to now this modern thing of my flight was canceled, and before the cancellation, the people at the gate are still saying, oh no, the flight's going to go, and you're actually getting rebooked automatically on the app on your phone. I mean, I was like, excuse me, I know you're saying the flight's going to go, but my app says the flight is canceled, and I've just been rebooked on a Swiss Air flight to Boston Airport that leaves in 30 minutes. So maybe I should go do that. And the gate agent's going, honestly, you guys have more update information than we do. So yeah, if that's what it's telling you, that's what you should do.
And go.
Because our app hasn't been updated to the latest version yet. I mean, I literally had a gate agent say this. And in fact, I had another one where my app was telling me my flight was canceled. The gate agent had literally just stood there and said, please don't leave the gate. Your flight is not canceled. It is going to go as soon. And the pilot of the flight took the microphone. This was in Europe. The pilot grabbed the microphone from the gate agent and said, this is nonsense. I'm the pilot of the flight. It has been canceled. Go to what the app is telling you. And the gate agent just went, do whatever you want to, and I mean, all these systems are automated now, and we're really quickly getting to a point where when the system is down, it's just going to be the end. They are no longer going to have the ability to do this manually, I would guess, within the next 5 years, because one, nobody will know how to do it. That Bert will have retired and died, and they can't call him anymore. We also saw stories today about numerous hospitals. I saw numerous stories from healthcare that basically said, we're down. Our systems are down. The ones I read did say we are still performing emergency procedures. We're still performing, things that have to be performed to save people's lives. But I did a test a few years ago. It's quite a few years ago now. And one of the hospitals we were testing, our test protocol was, I went in and I said, your network is down. So your TCP/IP network is down. Tell me which systems still work. And they basically said, nothing works at this point. And I was like, so you can't operate. And he said, we can't even do an X-ray because we no longer have the old film developing procedure that we used to use, because all the X-rays were digital, and the digital X-rays relied on the network, and the network relied on being connected to the internet. And, and they said, we have all these backups though. They had this backup and that backup. And I'm like, but what if all those were down? And they said, then we're basically closed for business. Now, I'm not trying to get everybody all worked up and think the world is ending, because the hospitals I saw today said, we're still open for emergency care. We're still open for emergency. And that stuff is being resolved. I don't like to be that, the world will end if the network goes down, because we have had this for years.
Yep.
And we do have, I mean, responsible companies have put in place procedures to deal with this that are far, far, far better than when I was doing those tests back in the aughts, as they say. Because back then it was just slowly transitioning from, a collection of doctors' offices saying, we don't use that stupid interweb thing, and people that had adopted it. but medical equipment did start to, evolve into that space. And you're seeing that more and more with AI reliance for analysis of x-rays and things like that. So as you get to that point, a lot of those old fashioned skills, the guy who knows how to drive the covered wagon with the horses attached to it when the Stanley steamer blows up, yeah, well, maybe I call Josh and he comes and saddles up the horses, but we start losing those skills, and and Jack Daniels retires and we don't have access to Jack anymore. And that stuff, Lou knew Morse code. I
don't know Morse code.
Lou could actually do Morse code, at a reasonable pace, and I'm like, I can't do that. I know what it is, but there's a modern generation that probably doesn't even know what it is. So this is one of those sort of cataclysms that happened today that is basically ongoing. My FedEx guy pulled up and he said, sorry, these packages are late. I know they were supposed to be here at 10 a.m. We're running about 3 hours back because our jets were not able to fly this morning. They were stopped, but they're back and flying now. So I think people are resolving this. So for a second, Josh, let's talk about what companies should be doing going forward. What do you think that companies should be doing from the CISO down? And then this would include, I think, now small and mid-sized companies. How do we plan for this kind of stuff going forward? So okay. I'll let you start that one.
There's a couple of really simple things you can do. Start off by doing the inventories that are the top 2 or 3 things on the CIS top 18. If you don't have an asset inventory, if you don't have an information inventory, and if you don't have data flow diagrams, you have no idea where you're vulnerable to this. It's really that simple. Like, know what you have. Go ahead.
Let me add one little subset to that, which I know is included in what you're saying, but I want to make sure people understand this. There's also a thing I call a connection inventory, which is included in those documents you're talking about. But I want to be sure we stress that, because as we have interconnected everything, if you are reliant on your office in Hong Kong, that's where they're running this particular tool. You need to know about that. You need to be aware that you're relying. I've seen companies over and over again going, everything quit. We don't know why. And you go look, and it's like, well, yeah, your database is actually in this repository that's in the one I was looking at, that it was in Vietnam, and their Vietnam office went down and nobody knew how to bring it back online. And it was like what you were talking about when you started today, that someone was physically going to have to go there. And I volunteered and got to fly to Vietnam first class to reset this thing, because there was nobody on the ground there that could do it. So I'm sorry. Go ahead with your list.
Helps if I come off mute. Okay. So yeah. So the connection inventory and the data flow diagrams, we're talking very similar things here. Where does my data flow through? I've got application 1 through 5. How does my data flow for application 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5? What network links does it go through? Where's the data stored? Where is it processed? Where is it disposed of? The entire data lifecycle, the entire application lifecycle, it should go through all of that. Okay. That will tell you where are my third-party prerequisites, where are my third-party systems that are critical, that are mission critical. If you don't understand that by the time you've done that, you haven't done your data flow diagrams right. And so what you do is you take those data flow diagrams, you take those connection inventories, the asset inventories, the information inventories, and between them all, number one, your auditors are happy because they love you. Number 2, you actually know what the hell you're doing these days now. And number 3, you can figure out, okay, where am I vulnerable? Where's my supply chain vulnerabilities? If Azure goes down, if GCP goes down, if AWS goes down, if my colo center goes down, what do I have as a backup? And it's the exact same thing as you were talking about, Doug. You walked in and said, your network is down. What do you do? Oh, okay. Well, is it my external network or my internal network? Oh, it's your internet connection. Okay. So these are the things I can still do. And I can pull it up on my data flow diagrams, on my connection diagrams in 10 seconds flat, and figure out what I can still do and what my backups are for every single point of failure on those diagrams, right?
But in my business continuity audit, my next question to you would be, okay, that's down and you can't pull up your data flow diagrams because they're stored on a cloud-based service and you can't get to them anymore. Now what? Because in the old days, you would see people say, well, we've got the Manhattan phone directory here in a drawer, and we'll look up the number in the Manhattan phone directory that we have, and we'll use the landline phone that's sitting over here that's wired into a copper wire, and we'll pull that up and make the call. So the same thing applies today. So when that's down And that window that you were planning to pull up on that website that's got the directory listing of all the people is not there. It's just got a blue screen of death. Now what? How do you call legal? How do you call the CISO? And I was, somebody the other day was talking to me about, like, let me get my phone in the shot. I was like, I don't even know my daughter's phone number because it's in here. It's in this phone. And if I don't have that phone, I don't even know where my hotel is located. I don't know where my car was parked.
I agree, which is why I have an iPad that I take with me on my travels, so I can have at least a semi half-assed replacement for my phone, which is why I use mostly cloud-based services. But you're right. If the cloud goes down or you don't, that's why we have backup services. And if you're big enough, you're going to have a crisis communication service, which is an out-of-band communication service in case the bad guys are inside your, buried somewhere, I have screenshots of Teams chat rooms with the bad guys going, no, we didn't break in that way. This is the way we did it. And wait, what? No, we just figured we'd tell you because it's just a nice scent. It's just a nice thing, And it's like, wait a minute. And they're literally in the incident response Teams chat room talking to you. And which is kind of cool in one sense and horrifying in another. So you're going to have out-of-band communication. You're going to have a secure storage that is outside your storage, your SAN, where your secure storage is got at least your playbooks, at least your phone tree, the various aspects of information security, BCPDR that you need in order to actually perform incident response. So you'll be able to access it.
And you need that. And I want to pull the words bad guy out of the whole thing because
disaster.
It's all, whatever. I'm not even talking about Chinese hackers are coming for you. I'm talking about Microsoft pushed an update and it locked up your whole network, and it wasn't your network. It was the network of that third party that you subscribe to that gives you the stock market ticker that feeds back into your company, as well as your badge service that lets you open the doors. And all that's coming from another third party who does your badges. And so when somebody shows up for work and they can't even get into the bathroom and, they try to leave the building and find out they can't exit either because their badges aren't reading, what are you going to do? What's your plan?
I've got a story.
Okay, we'll go.
So a friend of mine used to have systems at data centers all over the country. Okay. He'd have a half a rack here, a quarter rack there. He built data connection systems. And so he had servers at colos everywhere. Like he knew every colo around. I'd literally call him and be like, I need a quarter rack. He's like, okay, the best deal you're going to find is here. Thank you. He saved me thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars because he knew this stuff. After Hurricane Sandy, remember that? He went to New York City and he goes into the Google data center that his stuff was in. Google coloed some of their data centers. So they would allow you to colo in there. He's like, that's great. I'll colo in there. And he goes to get into the data center. It's running. The diesel generators are humming. Everything is perfect. It's beautiful. He goes, cool. I'm just going to go check my stuff. I'm going to console in. I'll be 5 minutes and I'm out of here. They're like, that's great. Okay, no problem. He goes to go in there, hits his card on the door. Door doesn't open. Interesting. He goes back. He's like, is my card bad? Is access list wrong? Like, no. He's like, okay, so what's going on? They're like, we don't know. We haven't actually been in there since it hit. Everything's working. We haven't needed to. He went, you haven't been in? No, we haven't needed to. So they go back and they're trying their cards. It's not working. It turns out the badge reader was not on the generator power. Oops.
Oh, also done that. I did a response on that, and we were testing backup generator circuits. They didn't want to. They said it's fine. Here's how it looks. They showed me a piece of paper. I said, what if we actually killed the power to see what it does? And what's the switchover time? And the thing that happened to them was they didn't have a capacitor. And so they finally agreed to do it on a Saturday afternoon when they were not in, heavy operation, killed the main power bus in the basement of the building. And when the power failed, I heard the generators start. They had these big diesel generators and I hear them start cranking. Well, the time between the failure of the power and the generators getting up to speed basically toasted all their servers. It didn't ruin them, but they all went down. Everything in their data center, basically rebooted. And some of those reboots, they learned a whole bunch of interesting things. There were reboots that started, and when the reboot came up, it was stuck on a screen that said press F1 to continue. There were reboots that just completely failed. There was Cisco equipment that had not had the running config saved in 10 years. This did cause a bit of a disaster, and boy, did I get yelled at. They were like, who the hell authorized this? And I was like, he did. I just suggested it. I never thought you would actually do it. and but they did it, and it caused total chaos, and they had never tested at this level. And I think that kind of test is important. I think your connectivity tests are critical. I mean, I'm more of an infrastructure person, and when I see these rack servers, there's stuff now that won't even load unless it has an internet connection. It will
Yep.
literally, there are all kinds of things you may have in your organization that it will need to validate a license with another site that you don't control. And if it can't do that, it's going to hang and just say, you need to validate your license and or type in a manual license, or we're not going to boot that there.
Okay, so let's cut to the chase. Effectively, what we're saying is, if you don't know your interrelationships with third parties, if you don't understand your supply chain risk, if you don't understand your connectivity, your connection diagrams, your data flow diagrams, all these things we've been talking about, you are at risk for not knowing what's going to happen if you have an outage of any kind: power, internet, software, driver, whatever. And if there's a problem, it's going to be a really, like this weekend, it's going to be really ugly for a lot of people. Okay. So the concept here is that you must understand your third party risks as well as your internal risks for disaster, cyber criminals, various other things. And if this sounds like a commercial for BCPDR, hi, welcome to our world.
Yeah. And I mean, and one thing I think that people are not understanding either is going to be that these third parties, it's very easy as a large organization to say, yeah, we have this. And who cares about those little guys, because they're just, their life sucks anyway. But you may now be dependent on something that you may not even know about, like the badge reader thing. So I've seen these companies get sold and divested and resold and divested, and they're sort of sitting out there. And when we subscribed to that badge reading service, it was called Blue Sky Badges, and that was fine. I knew the guy. We could call over there, and you find out, oh yeah, that was sold 2 years ago to a giant corporation in Indonesia, who then divested it, and it went independent. It's now operating in India. Then it went out of business, but another guy bought it in receivership, and they brought it back online. So it's actually owned by a Taiwanese third party, and it's operating with 6 people in Taiwan who are using cloud-based servers that are based in Vietnam. And so Vietnam has a power outage, and your connection diagram for this and your data flow, you're going, oh, I thought we were connected to Blue Sky badging service that's based in Austin, Texas. And they're like, yeah, what was the date on the bottom of that diagram you've got there? 5 years ago? Yeah. Okay. Are you sure? So are you sure you understand these, and are these things current? Because just like those old networking diagrams we used to look at and audit, and I would pull it out and it would have, a name on it. And I'm like, who is this? And they're like, oh, that guy. Yeah. He died like 7 years ago. So this hasn't been updated since this guy died. And they're like, yeah, I think we took a look at it 2 years ago. And I'm like, but why was the last signature on it 7 years ago by a dead guy? And like, well, we'll have to look into that. And like I say, as all this becomes more interrelated, everything's becoming interrelated to everything else. And this mesh is starting to show that when a component fails, especially when it's a major component, like say, there was a story this week about SAP, and there's, and Cisco and Palo Alto and all these things on and on and on. When one of those chunks goes down, it's going to be pretty strange. And you're going to see this sort of, like you saw this morning, just a spreading blackout across the world as this key critical infrastructure service fails. And this key critical infrastructure service, in this case, Microsoft 2022 server and CrowdStrike, is controlled by 2 companies. And not to slam them in particular, but Microsoft has shown a particular, I mean, everybody does it, but they've shown that they don't necessarily test the implications of things they roll out. And because it's getting so intricate, it's going to be really hard for them to do that at all, because your infrastructure may be very different than mine. And so when server update rolls out, and I don't use CrowdStrike, I use something else, or I use Defender, or I use this, or I use that, or I use Kaspersky, I don't know what the implication may be. And it's going to be really, and getting more and more impossible all the time for Microsoft to understand that diagram of what's the implication of doing this patch. I mean, I think that's going to get worse. We're going to see more of these kind of events. I mean,
oh yeah,
would you agree?
I would agree, which is why we absolutely need to test every update we get in a sample population before we let them out to the real world. That has implications. We can talk about that in a future show.
So I think for all of you out there listening, the message here is you need to understand these things, and it's going to be tough. It's not going to be the easiest thing in the world to put this together, but you do need to understand it. I will say what I say over and over and over again to you. You need to test this stuff. I don't mean do it in a tabletop where you sit down and somebody says, then I called James, call placed. You're going to have to actually call James on that number that you think James will answer and find out that James's cell phone number changed 4 times since that document was written. You're going to have to test what happens when that power fails. You're going to have to figure out when this app fails, when Microsoft won't boot, what do we do? What is the next call that you make? How do we get back online, and how long will that take? I'm not saying you have to be instantaneous, but you need to understand that time horizon. How long am I going to be down, and what are the implications of that? And if you don't, well, I got bad news for you. It's going to get worse. And eventually you're going to be the person holding that hot potato like CrowdStrike is right about now, with every news service on the face of the earth calling you as you watch your share price go down 15% in 15 minutes. And everybody calling you going, who do we call to file our $100 billion lawsuit against? Because every one of these organizations is going to be suing everybody on the face of the earth, from, I was delayed and I missed my daughter's wedding, to our company suffered irrevocable financial harm because the system was out. It was promised, so, I tell you, it's a scary business. Well, I think I'm going to wrap that, and I'm going to say thanks to Josh Marpet for all his amazing commentary on this and insights. I'm going to tell you, I hope you're surviving the day and that you're not trapped at an airport in Guam for the next 48 hours. Although if you're trapped in an airport in Guam for the next 48 hours, see some sights, go out, have some great food, have a good time, make the best of it. When I was in Tokyo, I just rode the train into town and had a good time. So regardless of where you are and how bad things are right now, it does seem to be working its way through the system. The worst case of food poisoning you ever had probably got resolved in a pay toilet in Puerto Rico, and things, things will be brighter tomorrow. So that is the Security Weekly News. Thank you, Josh. It was a great special report, and we'll see you next time, next week, I hope, unless everything goes down in the meantime. Do you know where your connection diagram is? You might want to go dig that baby out and see when the last time somebody signed it was. Thanks, and we'll see you next time.